Well, good afternoon. Happy Friday, October 11th. Mark Milam here, your mortgage professional. Listen, every Friday I come to you and I post a video about what's happening in the world of mortgage interest rates, what's happening with the larger economy and how that's relative or how that pertains to you. And really all of this is rooted in the economic data that our country reports, right? This is what moves the stock market. This is what moves the bond market. A lot of data that comes out about our labor market, about inflation, about whether the economy is expanding or the economy is contracting. And so we really predicate a lot of what happens in housing, especially now when affordability is such an issue, on this data that's reported by our federal government, particularly the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The problem becomes when we can't 100% trust that the data we're receiving is accurate. And you need only look as recently as last Friday's non-farm payroll report and unemployment report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics to understand what I'm talking about. So bear with me as I'm going to do a deep dive on this, but trust me, whether you're in housing looking to buy or refinance, or whether you're just simply living in this country, what I'm about to explain to you is having an impact on your day-to-day life. It's having an impact on our economy. It's having an impact on housing affordability. So when we get these jobs numbers, which are very, very important, right now our Federal Reserve is looking at the labor market, not inflation, but at the labor market to determine the path of future Fed rate cuts or not. That's what they're looking at. And strength in the labor market is going to tell the Fed to hold off, right? They don't want to risk reigniting inflation, and a strong labor market will do just that. Weakness in the labor market, or at least softness in the labor market, will give the Fed the confidence they need to continue cutting interest rates, to continue bringing down the cost of borrowing, and to make everything more affordable if you're borrowing for it, which of course you're doing for housing. So last Friday, October the 4th, we received the monthly non-farm payrolls report and the unemployment number from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, it's important to understand that these two numbers come to us in the form of surveys, but it's not the same survey. The non-farm payroll number, the number of jobs we created over the past 30 days, is predicated on something called the establishment survey. And this is a survey of businesses, right? And you would think that would be rock solid to have data from businesses. That tells us how many jobs we've created. Great. We thought we were going to create 140,000 jobs. We created 254,000, a blockbuster report, right? That's what you would think. And that's exactly how the markets reacted. The stock market went up, the bond market got crushed, mortgage interest rates went up, affordability worsened because now the Fed can't be so sure that they've got inflation under control. Perhaps a strong labor market will reignite inflation. That's the establishment survey. The other survey is called the household survey, and the household survey is what determines the unemployment rate. And going into this report, the unemployment rate was at roughly 4.2%. After the report, we dropped to 4.1%, meaning unemployment is coming down. Again, a sign of a strong labor market. But questions about the household survey call into question our actual unemployment rate. Let's take a look real quick at what's been happening with mortgage-backed securities. This was last Friday when we saw a huge sell-off in mortgage-backed securities and interest rates went up. Since then, it's still been more bad news, although not quite as dramatic. But Thursday, we got a little hint of it on the horizon. Friday, it happened. This was Monday. This is Wednesday. This is today. So mortgage rates generally increasing and the cost of borrowing going up. And you can see as we scroll down the screen here, there's that non-farm payroll number. There's that unemployment rate coming in under expectations. So let's go to the actual Bureau of Labor Statistics report. Here we go. The household survey data. Remember I told you that it was the household survey that determines the unemployment rate, right, at 4.1%. And we come down here to the establishment survey, which determines the number of jobs created at 254,000 jobs. Let's talk about this household survey. So the household survey reported, this is unbelievable, reported 785,000 government jobs created in the past 30 days. Hold on for 1 second. Let's digest this. In the past 30 days, The household survey is telling us that our federal government created 785,000 jobs, with the notable exception of the 1 month bounce back from COVID in June of 2020. We have never created that many government jobs in a single month. Listen, we're not bouncing back from COVID right now. The economy is relatively static on its trajectory, yet somehow in the past 30 days, we've added over 750,000 jobs in the government sector. If you subtract those jobs out, if you go to any kind of normal number for government job creation, the unemployment rate, instead of going down to 4.1%, goes up to 4.5%, a 3/10 of a percentage point increase, a substantially different picture as it pertains to the real unemployment rate in the United States. But because we created 785,000 jobs with government workers, the unemployment rate went down. So we can see here that the private employment increased by about 133 workers. Okay, that's private employment right there. This is government employment right here. Okay, that is a huge. So we can see here that the private employment increased by about 133 workers. Okay, that's private employment right there. This is government employment right here. Okay, that is a huge, huge change. Let's go over here. This is a little easier to see, so I put it into a Word doc. It's a little easier to read in the Word doc. So this is from Zero Hedge, so a nod to zerohedge.com for their data on this. The number of government workers tracked by the household survey soared to 785,000, right? This is from 21.4 million to 22.16 million. This is from a table I'm getting ready to show you. This is the biggest monthly surge in government workers on record. And while government workers soared by the most on record, private workers rose by 133,000, a far more believable number. It goes on to say that, listen, you get into this smoothing of seasonal adjustments. We all know in September, a lot of things start to change due to seasonal factors like kids going back to school, for instance, or the holidays are approaching, whatever it might be, summer ending and certain types of employment that change as summer shifts into fall. There's a seasonal adjustment that gets applied to these numbers. Very important to know, because before you even apply the seasonal adjustment, the number of government workers wasn't even 785, it was 1.322 million. We had 1.322 million of government jobs created that versus the actual number of jobs that were reported, which is unbelievable, right? That is a staggering increase in the number of government jobs created, and it's the reason why unemployment came in under expectations instead of over expectations. Okay, that is the unemployment rate, and one of the big question marks in this most recent report by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Let's talk about non-farm payrolls. I'll move this out of the screen here, and let's move to non-farm payrolls. By the way, here is the actual table from the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. And you can see, as we move to government workers, here's September at 22,216. These are in thousands. And this is August, the difference between these two being 785,000 workers created for the government sector in the past 30 days. So we switch over here to the non-farm payrolls number, and I'm going to go to my guy here, Marco, and it's tough for me to pronounce his last name, Bjejovic. I think that's how you pronounce it. He's going to talk about the non-farm payrolls number at 254,000 jobs created. He says that's far from actual. How far? Well, as far as a pie in the sky. The seasonal factor, remember I was talking about September and how we start to apply these seasonal factors to smooth out the data because of how jobs change as you move from summer to fall. The seasonal factor that got applied was so heavy-handed that if we'd have just gone with last year's seasonal factor, we would have created 145,000 jobs. That's 100,000 below what we reported. And if you used a seasonal factor that would be akin to what we saw pre-pandemic, we would have created 35,000 jobs, an incredibly weak jobs number. And the exact opposite of what just happened a week ago would have happened. We would have seen a rally in the bond market. We would have seen mortgage rates come down, not go up. We would have seen the stock market suffer and probably deteriorate some in the wake of 4.5% unemployment and 35,000 jobs created. But because of how our federal government applies seasonal adjustments, because of how our federal government can add 785,000 jobs in 30 days, we saw a completely different labor report. And those in the world of housing continue to suffer because of it. If we scroll on down a little bit more, he actually shows the graph of the non-farm payrolls September seasonal factor, and he's taking every September from 2024 all the way back to 1939. And guess what? The highest one on record is the one we got last Friday. So this all begs the question of how reliable is the data that we're receiving to predicate so much of what the Federal Reserve is going to do, right? We've seen a tremendous sell-off in mortgage-backed securities as a result of this jobs report. And one more factor before I close out here. There's a response rate to these surveys that we're relying on as Americans, right? We've been taking these surveys for non-farm payrolls and for unemployment for decades now. The establishment survey that came back for the non-farm payrolls number came back with a 62% response rate. That is one of the lowest response rates on record, meaning for every 10 surveys that were sent out, we got 6 back, right? A little more than 6 back. There calls into question the validity of this data when the response rate is so low, when the seasonal factor that's getting applied is a record high number. And you just have to start to wonder, what are we basing our economic projections on? What are we basing the Fed's next policy move on? Because if it's this data right here, we could be basing it upon a house of cards. And my hunch is, when we get the revisions in November for this month, and when we get the second set of revisions in December for this month, you're going to see a much different labor picture than the one that was just presented. In the meantime, if I can be of any service to you, don't hesitate to reach out over the holiday weekend. Mark.Milam at highlandmtg.com.